I'm raising this because I believe that we are now a part of a culture that in many ways is somewhat self-indulgent and self-centered. I believe that in a lot of ways, intentionally or unintentionally, we have perpetuated a kind of searching that is restless, a kind of restless searching for the latest sensation. And I think some of it is the result of poor parenting strategies. In some ways, there's a generation of people who taught the wrong things to children. I think it's also a part of an environment in which somehow we've allowed the issues of things like participation trophies to seep into our culture. And the truth is that all of this has created a kind of center of the self that's hard for people to get past. I just want to tell you that when you reward people for doing nothing, you're creating a problem for them later on. Because you can't go to work and get a participation trophy. And what rewarding does to people who've done nothing, it makes the recipient of the reward feel guilty because they know they didn't earn it. And it cheapens the reward for those who know they did. And when you spend time creating and developing that mentality in a culture, you create a kind of self-absorption where I become the center of the universe. And when God was trying to help Israel not live out of that framework, God decided, I want to give you a brand new order that will keep you from ever thinking you are the center of the world. I've heard many people talk about God and say that God orders our steps. That's true. But few of us realize that God also orders our stops. And there are some things and some ways in which God says, no, I need you to embrace my order, which is to always be other-minded. Where it cannot be just about me. It's happened in our theology, it's in our pulpits. I'm going to get my blessing right now. And this idea of self-absorption, of how to have a better life, how to have a better this, how to be a more prosperous, etc. They're not all bad. It's okay to aim at happiness. But the error is when you make happiness your highest and only target. Then you are exalting a feeling as if it's God. And that will never satisfy you at the deepest levels. And so God was saying to the nation, I need you to remember that the goal for you cannot be personal fulfillment. Because as a goal, that's far too limited for you to be what I need you to be in the world I'm calling you to occupy. And so my new order is going to create some new realities for you in which there are not just my regulation of your starts, your steps, but I'm going to regulate your stops. and make sure that you give attention to the things I want you to give attention to that have little or nothing to do with yourself. I'm going to make sure that you think about others before you exclusively only think about yourself. In fact, one of the things that I've been sort of working through is that this idea of self-realization has to always be married to the realization of others. Because the only true good is the common good. If it's only good for you, but it's not good for anybody else, then it can't be true. You gotta want for other people what you want for yourself. And when you don't want for others what you want for yourself, you don't have what's true. Because the true good will always be the common good. And when you've embraced that idea of me, mine, us four, no more, you are pushing against the order of God. Because God is always other-centered. So he says, I want to change how you do business here. You must not pass along false rumors. You must not cooperate with evil people by lying on the witness stand. You must not follow the crowd in doing wrong when you are called to testify in a dispute. Do not be swayed by the crowd to twist justice, and do not slant your testimony in favor of a person just because that person is poor. If you come upon your enemy's ox or donkey that is strayed away, take it back to its owner. If you see that the donkey of someone who hates you has collapsed under its load, stop. You can't walk by. He expands it in Matthew 5 by saying to his people, I want you to stop being like everybody else. And I want you to start being the people I called you to be, which means you can't only love people who think like you, believe like you, look like you. If you're going to be like me, you have to love other folks more than you love just yourself. And it's never going to be enough if you only love people who love you back. Now, I get it, because it's hard to claim you can love somebody when you're not getting anything in return. But you see, you don't need Jesus for that. If you love somebody who loves you, if you do right to somebody who does right to you, if you bless somebody who's blessing you, you don't need to be Christian. You could just be smart. Do you know when you need Jesus? You need Christ when you're loving and you get nothing in return. You need Christ when you're blessing and not being blessed back. You need Christ when somebody is taking and you're not receiving. Because it's easy to do what people do to you, but it's hard when it's your enemy. And you see, the reason why the Lord was going after this thing is because he wanted to make sure that there was a kind of justice that was being permeated among his people that was not taking place outside of that, and in many cases, inside that community. There are a lot of us who think we're being Christian because we do some good things. But when that gets tested, whereby bad things come your way, and you now have to commit to continue doing good things, that becomes a whole nother story. And you see, when God was laying this out, God was saying, the reason I want you to do it this way is because I am justice. It is not that justice is some legal value. Justice is a theological property in God. And it's not a matter of just the law. For justice to occur, there has to be a respect for other human beings. And his justice is because his treatment of his people has to correspond with who he is. Which means if you're going to be like him, you're going to have to love justice too. And his call here in this text reminds you and I that concern and compassion are the two tools that you have to have in the new order. You can't raise holy hands if they're not helping hands. If all you do is raise your hands and worship, but you don't extend your hands to help, then God says, no, you're not at all behaving in a way that's consistent with who I am. And he goes further because he says, verse 6, in a lawsuit, do not deny justice to the poor. Be sure never to charge anyone falsely with evil. Never sentence an innocent or blameless person to death. For I declare a guilty person to be innocent. Take no bribes, for a bribe makes you ignore something that you clearly see. A bribe makes even a righteous person twist the truth. Prior to that, he says, I need you to be careful with what you say, because when you make a false charge or you deny an accurate one, you've got to learn that you can't repeat rumors and you can't invent them either. So stop talking about what you do not understand, because at the end of the day, I find that offensive. In the ancient world, there was always 2 or 3 witnesses required. And I want to go one step further. This will be redundant, but I'll risk redundancy. If 3 of us rob a bank and I get caught, I don't tell on the 2 that robbed it with me. I suffer the consequences for my sin. But if you know who shot Jamal and you don't tell, that ain't snitching, that's you being a coward.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And that mentality destroys our community.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
There is this challenge that justice can't be affected by status. He says you can't twist it for the poor, and the implication is you can't twist it for the rich either. Because usually the rich get bail and the poor get jail. I've talked to too many young men and women who are incarcerated simply because they can't raise the bail. They're not guilty, they're just poor. And God says, no, I need that to stop. What do you mean, Pastor? God says, if you're going to be like me, then you can't be partial or sentimental. You have to find your balance based upon being just. And when you're sentimental, you can't be just. When you're partial, you can't be just. I need you to be neither sentimental nor partial. I need you to just be just. If you're going to be like me. Yes, sir. And he doesn't stop there. He goes further. Because what God is asking for us to do is to enter into each other's orbit and always see the other as more significant than ourselves. And you see, you can't pull this new order off until you see yourself in other people. You know why you hate some people? Because they remind you of you. Come on, don't play with me. I want to help you because there are some reasons why you get so angry with certain members of your family, members of your clan, members of your church, or whatever the case may be. You get angry with them because inside of them there is the seed of you. You see, when I hurt you, I think you should know that I didn't mean it. When you hurt me, I say you meant to do it. Come on. See, when you hurt me, I'm thinking, oh no, you did that on purpose. But when I hurt you, I expect that you should know I didn't mean it. And until you can see yourself in other people, you can't deal with them justly, and you can't love them effectively because you keep living in your own head and inside your own skin. And you have to get out of that and be other-centered. And you have to want for others what you want for yourself. You can't preach freedom for other people. You can't preach freedom for yourself if you don't want the same thing for other people. I want to be free, but I don't want you to be free. Now, there's something perverted in that kind of thinking. And self-realization has always a need to be actualized in the realization of other people. And the only true good is the common good. If it's only true for you, then you have a lie. Because when it's good for us, it becomes the common good. You say, well, Williams, I'm not sure what it is I'm supposed to do. Read Micah 6:8. Love justice, love mercy, and walk humbly before your God. And we have bought into some things that are not the order of God because we have bought into this idea of self-sufficiency, self-absorption, and how I can benefit from the relationships as opposed to how we can benefit. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I know some of you buy into the social idea of networking, and networking is a fancy word for saying I'm going to use people to get what I want. You are only as good to me as you are in helping me to achieve my goal. And if you can't help me, then I don't really need a relationship with you. That has been insidiously sown into your thinking, into our culture. And what it says is you are expendable only up until the time in which you are helping me no longer. After that, you're done. Goodbye. I move on to what's next. And we carry that idea into our marriages, into our churches, into our corporate centers. We take that same mentality there. And God was saying, no, I got a new order. I want to make sure you understand that you don't live for the ultimate goal of being happy. Because when the ultimate goal is the desire to be happy, you have exalted a feeling to the place of God. And I came to tell you this morning, look, there's a God who does love you. But when you've been born again, if you think God is only concerned with your comfort, then you have not read the Bible and understand God. Because while God, in the situation you are in this morning, no matter what it is, educationally or financially or politically or relationally, God could fix your situation right now with something less than a snap of a finger, the blink of an eye. He could fix it, but he hasn't. And the question is, why haven't you? It's because I want something more for you. And in the problems of your life, what you don't get is comfort and happiness. You get something better. You say, what's that? You get me. You get to learn who I am. You get to love who I am. You get to see me at my best and at my zenith, because as you encounter me, your eyes are opened and all you can say is, God, I love you. And if you just switch your goals around to not being self-fulfilled, not being happy, but to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your strength, you might see something change. Other-centered, a brand new order. That I get is hard. I understand it. But that new order, God says, is a part of not only an other-centeredness, it's the fact that you understand what it means to be oppressed. You say, why? Where is it in the text? He says it here. He said, look, verse 9, you must not oppress foreigners. Why not? You know what it's like to be a foreigner. For you yourselves were once foreigners in the land of Egypt. In fact, he goes further and says, plant and harvest your crops for 6 years, but let the land be renewed and lie uncultivated during the 7th year. Then let the poor among you harvest whatever grows on its own. Leave the rest for wild animals to eat. The same applies to your vineyards and your olive groves. And then he says, for 6 days I want you to work, but make sure that one day, that there's one day out of 7 that looks different for every other day. One day out of 7. And here's where I'm absolutely convinced that God is smarter than us. You know, before the Industrial Revolution, much of what we do in terms of work was shaped by Puritanism and Protestantism. This idea of work to prove to be industrious. But God said, no. I want you to work 6 days, but I want you to make sure one day out of 7 is one you give to me. Now, I know in the 21st century, people work shift. I'm not arguing for what day it is, but I'm arguing that one day out of 7 ought to be different from any other day. You say, why? Because that's what reminds me of my need for him. In fact, I'm going to go one step further. You see, this idea of what it means to be kind meant that you had not only to be considerate beyond what you felt about someone. Your feelings couldn't hinder your behavior, but neither could it hinder your worship or your work attitude. So God institutes the sabbatical, the Sabbath, not so that people would be redeemed, but because they already were. You're not redeemed because you keep the Sabbath. You keep the Sabbath because you've been redeemed. And you realize that at your best, all you are is a cog in the industrial wheel. So God says, I want you to make sure that you are resting because the land requires it, you require it, your farm equipment called an ox and a donkey require it. And so every 7 day, out of 7 days, I want one day to be different from the others. In fact, I'm going to go one step further. I don't think this was an idea that was just limited or should be limited. You see, the sabbatical year as God lays it out was not for the elite. It was for the manual worker. The sabbatical year was we work for 6 years, but on the 7th, we don't do any work because we have to recover. We have to recoup. The 7-day, one-day Sabbath was extended from a week to an entire year called Jubilee, where you worked for 6 years, but on the 7th year, nobody worked because the land needed to replenish itself. And God said, in this new order, I'm doing it so that the poor have something they too can eat. Land goes back to them. The harvest belongs to them because I have my own welfare system. And in that 7th year, everything belongs to poor people. You see, God didn't want people to be poor as a result of being oppressed. So he created a new order in which if you were poor, you didn't have to be poor for life. You could come up out of your poverty because God had established a new order and nobody had to pay for their mistakes forever. I said it earlier and I'm trying to close, but I was talking to some people the other night trying to explain to them this other-centered idea outside of a classroom, and I was trying to say that the problem I have is that too many people in the culture keep equating poverty with bad character. That the reason why people are poor is because they're lazy, because they don't want to work, because they have these bad vices. And I'm not saying I haven't run into anybody like that. We all know somebody that don't want to work. We all know somebody would rather gamble, drink liquor, smoke blunts, get high than pay their light bill. But don't write off a whole group of people claiming that's their situation. Because you can't find me somebody working 2 jobs and then tell me that they're lazy. Don't nobody work 2 jobs that's lazy. They try to make ends meet. And if character should be equated with poverty, then we got the most flawed character living in the White House, and he's a millionaire. Character can't be consistent with poverty. And God was saying, I don't want you to fall into that trap. I don't want you to spread gossip and repeat rumors, and I don't want you to invent them. I want you to make sure that your justice is not affected by status. I want you to make absolutely sure that the way you realize the distribution of what is right is based upon not sentimentality, not partiality. I want you to make absolutely sure that you commit yourself to a kind of justice, because if you don't, when they cry out to me for help, I will respond. And one of the reasons why I'm done with this passage, before I'm done with this passage, is because I think that when you are going through hard times and people have sinned against you, what you always want to tell yourself is, it's okay. God sees. I'll risk redundancy again, but I told you of the woman I met about a year ago who had been abused horribly, sexually, emotionally, physically. And after having given her an assignment of reading the Bible, the book of Revelation was what she said changed her outlook. Now, trust me, none of the passages given to her prior to that had anything to do with the book of Revelation. It was all the typical stuff, the counseling stuff, the book of James, the ideas of reconciliation, the ideas of forgiveness, all that stuff. And she didn't read any of that. She read the book of Revelation. And she said that the reading of that book healed her heart. And you hear that and you say, well, how is that possible? She said, because I recognized finally, after having been a Christian all these years, that nobody gets away with anything. That at the end of the day, whatever you've done to me, God is going to see to it that there's a reckoning. God's going to fix it. And even if I don't see it, nobody gets away with anything. God will handle it. Why? Because God is just. And I think if we're going to be like God, we embrace a brand new order of how we engage, of how we minister, of how we see people. You want for them what you want for yourself. Your self-realization is bedrocked in their realization as the other. And the only true good is the common good. Now, I want to wrap this up, but I couldn't because I kept reading and I got to this idea of these festivals that we'll talk about later. But I was amazed by the fact that after the sabbatical year, after this consideration, and after this sort of consecration, the people had this celebration where they brought their things and they gave it to God. And it occurs to me that as they are involved in these festivals, each year you must celebrate 3 festivals in my honor. You couldn't come and bring anything to God. You had to come to God with something in your hand as a result of your commitment to help others. I know there are people in church, and don't hold it against nobody, but I've been in services where somebody said, come on, give God a wave offering. Well, that's not a biblical wave offering. You see, in the Bible, the wave offering had something in its hand. It was a symbolism of how good you've been throughout the harvest season. And so the fat of my cattle, the beauty of my crops, I'm coming and I'm saying, Lord, thank you for blessing me. But you couldn't just stop by giving God something. You had to go one further. You had to offer not just your resources, you had to offer yourself. And it's easy to give God's resources, but sometimes it's harder to give him both your resources and yourself. And God says, no. I want you to be so committed to the enterprise of others that you're not giving just stuff, but you're giving your life as well. And you know, the first place you start is by giving your life to the one who is the chief giver of all. You start by surrendering who you are and allowing who you are to be enveloped by who he is. And then what God does is he changes the way you talk. And then he changes the way you listen. He changes the way you see. And then you become a walking and living and breathing embodiment of who Christ is. And people look at you, but they really see Jesus. And you see, that's what a new order really looks like. A new order is a new way of living. It's a new way of giving. It's a new way of being, because now he has consumed me, and what I used to be, I am no longer. And it changes how I engage the people around me, and it changes the way I see the people around me, because I realize that I'm on my way and God wants to use me to bring others right along with me. Do I have a witness? You realize you're not all that in a bag of chips and some hot air, but neither is anybody else, and you start to see your life in theirs, and you say, let's do this together. And we start moving out and becoming what God calls us to be. And it's not because I'm better than you or bigger than you. I just realize that we both have the same need. That's a Christ in our lives to help us be what God has called us to be. In fact, I need to shut this down, but I want to tell you that God sent to his people an angel and said, listen, he will guide you. It's a theophanic impression of an indication of who God is among his people. A theophany of sorts. And God says, what I want you to do is I want you to obey this voice, obey this angel as you make your way on your journey. Because when you've been born again and redeemed, you still got to listen to somebody. Now that angel was for them, but for us it's Christ and his Spirit, who while we are on our way, progressing and processing from earth to glory, we're listening to his voice. And he's guiding us along the way so that wrong turns and falling off of cliffs doesn't occur, because God is guiding us. And while God is guiding us along the way, you can't forget that there are some other people who are still in their journey as well. I said I wasn't going to mention it this morning, but I can't help it. Because right now, there's something called a caravan. And don't believe all the lies. It won't be here tomorrow. If those folks make it here at all, they'll get here maybe in a month. You have been taught to believe that they're right at the doorstep. That's not at all the case. There are people on their way. But let me tell you what they look like. They're people who are trying to escape their situation. There are people who are looking for a better place and a better circumstance and a better living arrangement and a better sense of God's good bounty that he wants for every human being. And it reminds me that they're not alone, because I'm on my way somewhere too. And I'm looking for a place as well, where every day will be Sunday and every day will be sunny, and there'll be the light of the King who sits on the throne, and no need of a light there, because I'm on my way somewhere as well. The good news is that the one who guides me is already there. I heard him say in John 14, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you, but I go to prepare. He's already there. And I'm on my way to where he is. And I want to help somebody, anybody, everybody get to know who he is as they get to where they're going. Is there anybody here that can say, yes, I'm so glad that his love lifted me. I'm so glad that God gave me a new order. Don't forget about other folks. Don't live just for yourself. It is not the design of God. Want for other people what you want for yourself. And work in a way that has hands that are both holy and helping. And in that, God is praised. Do I have a witness? Anybody here ever got a helping hand? Did he lift you up? Did he turn you around? Did he plant your feet? Did he give you a new way of loving? A new way of seeing? Then tell somebody, come see a man that can change your life. Come see a Savior that can give you strength when you're weak, help when you're hopeless, and a new way of seeing the world and seeing his grace.